The stage lights buzzed overhead like restless insects as Donald Trump leaned forward at the debate podium, his smirk sharp as ever. Opposite him, Ibrahim Traoré stood still, arms at his sides, eyes unreadable. "Let's make one thing clear," Trump declared, his voice booming across the auditorium. "America decides. We decide the rules, the winners, the global future." A ripple moved through the audience, applause from some, uneasy murmurs from others. Traoré didn't move or blink. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but seismic. "Not in my house." The room shifted. No shouting, no raised hand, no frantic counter, just that sentence, solid as iron. Trump tilted his head with amusement. "Your house? Let me remind you, you're on our stage, in our country, speaking our language." Traoré stepped forward once, not in threat, but in presence. "And yet," he said evenly, "your cameras are on me." The moderator tried to cut in, but the attention was already sealed. Traoré's posture was steady, not a fist, not a lecturing finger, just the stillness of a man unafraid to exist where he was never invited. "You speak of rules," he continued, "but those who made your rules never asked us what we needed. You decided what was best for us, and now you wonder why we speak without your permission." Trump chuckled. "You should be grateful. Without America, you'd still be fighting in the mud." The audience tensed. Traoré let the silence linger before replying, his voice unwavering. "Without America, we wouldn't be rebuilding from what was taken. The air shift, collision of worlds, empire against resistance, spectacle against memory, and the crowd felt it." Trump adjusted his tie with a practiced laugh, the kind that filled stadiums and rallies. "We gave you aid. We gave you democracy. What have you given the world?" Traoré's answer came instantly. "Endurance. We gave the world proof that survival is not submission." The moderator glanced nervously toward the control booth. This wasn't unfolding like any other televised debate. The structure had cracked, and the two men were no longer exchanging policies, but identities, worldviews, and scars. Trump leaned in, his voice sharpened by desperation as he sensed his audience slipping. "You think slogans and spirit can compete with superpower status? You want to rewrite the world order with poetry?" Traoré's lips curled, not into a smile, but something colder. "I don't write poetry," he said. "I write terms, and I don't need your permission to sign them." The auditorium rippled, journalists in the back typing faster. "You're a soldier," Trump barked, "not a diplomat. Stay in your lane." Traoré nodded slowly, deliberately. "You're right. I am a soldier, and soldiers rebuild what diplomats destroy." The cameras caught Trump's jaw tighten, just a twitch, but enough to betray the shift. For the first time, it wasn't clear who controlled the narrative. "You build walls," Traoré continued, voice steady. "We build people. You create allies through dependence. We forge loyalty through dignity." Trump tried to cut in. "You wouldn't last a week without American protection." Traoré's eyes didn't flinch. "We lasted centuries under occupation. Don't mistake silence for weakness." We were waiting for the right time to speak. The crowd hushed, the moderator's voice cracking as she struggled to regain order. This wasn't a debate. It was an exorcism of power, of assumptions, of the belief that one nation always led while others followed. And Traoré wasn't following. He was rewriting. By the third round of questions, the moderator had abandoned control, as what began as a foreign policy discussion unraveled into something raw and elemental. It was no longer about alliances, but about ownership of history. Trump stood stiffly, arms crossed, straining to reclaim the air with bluster. "We've invested billions in your continent, in infrastructure, in aid, in stability. That's generosity, pure and simple." Traoré tilted his head slightly, the gesture subtle, yet searing. "You call it generosity. We call it control, dressed up with a bow." The audience murmured, and even Trump's usually boisterous supporters in the front row, had grown quiet. Trump waved a dismissive hand. You're biting the hand that feeds you. No, Traoré replied calmly. I'm removing the leash you dressed as help. The line didn't just land, it detonated. Online, the clip was already being cut, shared, and captioned. Removing the leash began trending before the segment had even finished. Backstage, a producer whispered, he's not supposed to dominate this segment. The director's reply was flat. Doesn't matter. He already has. Trump jabbed a finger, sharp and accusatory. You think you're clever, but without our markets, your voice is a whisper. Traoré didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. Then listen closely, he said. Whispers grow into winds and winds erase empires. The metaphor hit harder than any policy bullet point because it wasn't abstract. It was memory, legacy, a wound being spoken aloud. Trump tried to seize momentum, his voice rising. You're here for the show. Just another rebel chasing applause. For the first time, Traoré smiled. I don't lead for applause, he said. I lead without it. The room shifted. Instantly no more laughter, no more posturing. Trump's smirk faded like a man realizing too late that the spotlight had moved. The microphone wasn't in Traoré's hand, but the moment was. Backstage, producers scrambled as viewership spiked mid-broadcast. Social media flooded with clips captioned, Traoré just took the crown off the table, and Trump finally met his match. Inside the studio, even the silence between exchanges grew heavier, as if the lights themselves had dimmed. Trump tried again, slower this time. You think power is built with words, with pride. That's not how the world works. Power is leverage, money, muscle, nuclear muscle. Traoré didn't T-blink. Then I suppose I'm not here to play by your world's rules. Trump stepped forward, looming with practiced intimidation, a tactic that had unnerved many before, but Traoré didn't T-flinch. He didn't even shift. Intimidation, he said evenly, only works on those afraid of losing something. I have nothing to lose. I already lost my childhood to war, my elders to colonialists, my country's wealth to your policies. He paused, eyes steady. Now it's your turn to feel watched, to feel questioned. You're not the only one holding the mic anymore. Trump opened his mouth but no words came. Traoré's voice cut the silence once more. Respect cannot be borrowed. It must be taken. And you've mistaken obedience for respect for too long. The moderator sat stunned, whispering into her earpiece, as if even she couldn't process what was unfolding. Traoré turned, not to the studio audience, but to the millions watching across the world. Leadership, he said, voice steady, isn't domination. It's vision. You called it dangerous when we stopped following you. That's because you only feel safe when we're beneath you. Trump stiffened, jaw locked. You say you lead the free world, Traoré pressed. But what good is freedom when it's yours to give or take? Silence followed, tense, coiled, the kind that comes before an empire stumbles. The moderator's next question was meant to diffuse, something about trade routes in the Sahel, but no one cared anymore. This wasn't about logistics. It was about legitimacy. Trump leaned on the podium, swagger fading. So what then? You want the world to revolve around you? Around Burkina Faso? Traoré met his gaze, not with anger, but with pity. No, he said softly. I want the world to stop revolving around you. The line detonated instantly, destined to be clipped, replayed, translated into 30 languages, and plastered across every feed from Lagos to Los Angeles. Trump snorted, reaching for bluster. You sound ungrateful. Outdated. Traoré stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Gratitude is for gifts. What you offer comes with strings, contracts, conditions, consequences. You give aid, we give minerals. You give loans, we give our land. You call it charity, we call it extortion. The moderator tried to steer away. Let's turn now to, no, Traoré interrupted, his voice calm but immovable. Let's stay here. Let's stay in this discomfort. Because that's the problem, isn't it? You built a world where only your pain matters, where only your fears shape policy, where your democracy is the model, but never the mirror. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't clap, but leaned in closer, caught in the gravity of his words. Trump, unusually quiet, muttered, "You've had your say." Traoré's voice cut through him like glass. "No, I've had your stage. Now I want your silence." The studio shifted, and so did the world. Even Trump's most loyal aides backstage could see if the room no longer belonged to him. Power wasn't in the podium anymore. It pulsed in the words, and every pulse now ran through Traoré. Trump's mouth opened, desperate for reply, but Traoré had already turned back to the moderator. "I'm done answering old questions," he said calmly. "Ask me something new." Traoré faced Trump without flinching, every word striking like a blade. "I'm removing the leash you dressed as help." The line exploded online before the debate even ended, turning whispers into winds. Trump jabbed a finger, snarling that without America's markets, Traoré's voice was nothing. But Traoré's calm reply cut deeper. Whispers grow into winds, and winds erase empires. The crowd felt the shift hit was no longer about policy, but legitimacy. Trump tried to frame Traoré as a rebel chasing applause, yet Traoré's calm retort, "I lead without it," turned the room cold. Every attempt to intimidate him failed. As he spoke of childhood lost to war, elders taken by colonialism, and wealth drained by foreign powers, until even Trump's voice faltered. "Respect can't be borrowed, must be taken," he declared, and the silence grew heavier. When asked about a new world order, Traoré replied without hesitation, "It looks like truth louder than tradition, like no child thanking a foreign flag for survival, like nations defining themselves without asking Washington, Paris, or Tel Aviv." Trump scoffed, but Traoré pressed on. "You mistake endurance for virtue. You built cages and called them systems. Gold bars are still bars. You once decided who sat at the table now. We are building our own." Trump boasted about America's post-war order, but Traoré struck back. "Order or obedience? You rebuilt the world in your image, but you never asked who wanted to look like you. You gave structure, trade, stability, rules, but those rules always served you first. When we followed them, you praised us. When we questioned them, you sanctioned us. When we defied them, you invaded us. You see yourself as the center, but the world is shifting. You had the map, we have the compass. We don't need to follow the path you carved with war and wealth." Trump snapped, "Then enjoy the jungle," but Traoré only nodded. "We will, because we know how to survive it. Unlike you, we never burned the forest to plant flags." A murmur swept through the audience as he smiled, not smug, but assured. "Empires don't fall in explosions," he said softly. "They crumble when people stop looking up." Trump stiffened, his words blunted as Traoré controlled the room. Even the moderator trembled as the world leaned forward, waiting for Traoré's next words. Trump barked, "Enough poetry. Real power is sanctions, troops, dollars, votes. That's what moves the world." Traoré tilted his head, amused. "And still, you lost this room with nothing but a sentence." When Trump demanded, "What do you even bring to this stage?" Traoré answered, "I bring story, and story outlives steel." Trump scoffed, "Stories don't stop missiles." But Traoré cut back, "No, but they stop men from firing them." Turning to the cameras, his words carried beyond the studio. "You wield sanctions like signatures, decrees from a throne you never earned. But we are nations, our peoples. We write stories of resistance, of rebuilding, of refusing to vanish. You write borders, we write bloodlines. You write debt, we write dignity. You write nations as clients, we write them as families." Trump sneered, "You think you're nobly or just noise?" Traoré nodded slightly. Funny, they said the same of every movement before it won. Silence dropped like a curtain. You built walls to keep us out, Traoré said, but now we don't want in. We want something else entirely. When? Trump asked what that was. Traoré smiled. A world that doesn't need your approval. The crowd did not cheer. They breathed together, believing for a moment such a world could be real. Rattled, Trump snapped. You're delusional, you. Think applause online makes you a threat. Traoré calmly replied, I'm not a threat. I'm a mirror, and the reflection terrifies you. Trump growled, you don't understand leadership, you confuse it with command. Traoré stood firm. You think control is respect, but true leaders don't need followers, they inspire builders. Trump sneered, you sound like a rebel with a microphone. Traoré's gaze hardened, and you sound like a king without a kingdom. Your grip weakens every time someone dares to speak without your permission. The crowd stirred. Trump insisted, you forget who you're talking to. Traoré replied evenly, no, I know exactly who you are, a man who thinks the crown you once wore still fits. But the world's head has changed shape. Trump jabbed his finger, shouting, I'm still the most powerful man in the world. Traoré leaned closer, his voice steady. Then why are you shouting? Power doesn't scream, it simply is. Your crown is cracking, and beneath it, we don't see gold, we see fear. You thought history would end with your name carved into it, but history keeps writing, and your chapter is shrinking. The broadcast no longer felt like a debate, but like a reckoning, a passing of power older than politics. Traoré wasn't asking for it, he was taking it. The silence grew suffocating as Trump muttered, you can't rewrite the rules. The world doesn't change because you want it to. Traoré answered calmly, then it will change without asking. The moderator sat frozen as Traoré's gaze swept across the world. We don't rise because we're allowed. We rise because we're done asking. You mistook silence for obedience, restraint for weakness, applause for power, but while you've been performing, we've been building. You came to remind me who decides. I came to remind you, no longer. Here, not anymore. In this house, we speak truth, not protocol. We choose people over puppets. We don't bow, we build. The pause felt biblical. Trump muttered, you think this is the beginning of something. Traoré smiled. It already began, you just weren't invited. The broadcast ended not with applause, but with a freeze of two men, one clinging to the past, the other walking into the future. They called it a debate, but it was a reckoning. Trump brought his legacy. Traoré brought tomorrow. In a room built to echo old power, a new voice didn't echo it, rewrote the script. Traoré didn't demand respect, didn't wait for permission, didn't kneel, didn't shout. He simply stood, and that was enough. For some men lead by applause, but others lead when the applause fades and the world still listens. Trump tried to command the conversation, but Traoré proved it had already moved on, and perhaps the world had to.